I'm Jessica, 32, and I built my marketing agency from nothing but determination and coffee. When I met Michael, I thought I'd found my perfect match: smart, supportive, and from what seemed like a loving family. His mother, Barbara, welcomed me with open arms, even offering my agency the marketing contract for her retail empire. But behind that million-dollar smile lurked something sinister. Last Christmas, she cornered me alone and delivered an ultimatum that still makes my blood run cold. Pay me $200,000 for the connections I've given you, or forget ever seeing my son again. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button. And subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when family business turns toxic. I never had anything handed to me. Growing up in a small town with parents who worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, I learned early that success would only come through my own efforts. After college, where I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay tuition, I started my marketing agency in my tiny studio apartment with exactly 2 clients and a mountain of student debt. Those first few years were brutal. I slept on an air mattress to save money, worked 16-hour days, and built my client list one small business at a time. By year 3, I'd managed to hire my first employee, Amanda, who believed in my vision enough to take a chance on a fledgling agency. By year 5, we had an actual office with 10 employees and a reputation for innovative campaigns that delivered real results. By year 7, when I met Michael, we'd grown to 20 employees and were finally being invited to pitch to larger companies. I met Michael at a digital innovation conference in Seattle. He was presenting on software solutions for retail analytics, and I was immediately drawn to his intelligence and the way he made complex concepts accessible. Unlike many tech guys I'd met, he actually made eye contact with the audience and seemed genuinely interested in helping people understand his work rather than showing off how smart he was. We literally bumped into each other at the coffee station during a break. I spilled coffee on his shirt, he made a joke about it being an improvement to his fashion sense, and somehow we ended up talking through the next session and exchanging numbers. Our first date was the following night, and the connection was immediate. We both understood the sacrifice and drive needed to build something from nothing. Michael had rejected his family's financial support to create his own software consulting business, which immediately earned my respect. When he mentioned his mother owned a chain of high-end boutiques across the Northwest, I was impressed but didn't think much of it. Michael was so down-to-earth and unpretentious that it was hard to imagine him coming from serious money. He explained that while his family was wealthy, he'd wanted to prove himself on his own terms, something I deeply understood. 3 months into dating, Michael suggested I meet his mother. "She's intense," he warned, "but she'll love you because you're driven like she is." Barbara Andrews welcomed me into her Seattle mansion with a warm hug and compliments about my entrepreneurial spirit that Michael had apparently told her all about. She was a striking woman in her early 60s with perfectly styled silver hair, impeccable clothes, and the confident aura of someone used to being obeyed. Throughout dinner, she asked thoughtful questions about my business growth strategies and marketing philosophy. I found myself drawn to her sharp mind and the story of how she'd built her retail empire, starting with one small clothing store 30 years ago and expanding to 27 locations across 3 states. When she mentioned her marketing team was stuck in the last decade and asked if my agency might be interested in consulting for her, it felt like winning the lottery. "I believe in supporting family," she said, squeezing my hand. "And anyone who makes my Michael this happy is family." I was touched by her acceptance and excited about the professional opportunity. Michael squeezed my knee under the table, obviously pleased that we were hitting it off. Looking back, I should have noticed how Michael tensed slightly when his mother called 3 times during our date the next night. I should have paid attention when he mentioned casually that his last serious girlfriend couldn't handle his mother's involvement. But I was falling in love and seeing only what I wanted to see. When Michael proposed 6 months later, Barbara, immediately took charge of wedding planning, suggesting venues, florists, and caterers before I'd even had time to process the engagement. My best friend Rachel raised an eyebrow when Barbara called me during our celebratory girls' night to discuss wedding dress appointments she'd already scheduled. "Is she always going to be this present in your life?" Rachel asked after I hung up. "She's just excited," I defended, "and she has amazing taste and connections. It's actually really helpful." Rachel looked unconvinced. "Just make sure you're still having the wedding you want, not the one she wants." I laughed it off, but a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. Still, when Barbara offered to have her company sign a 1-year marketing contract with my agency as an engagement present, that seed was quickly buried under gratitude and professional excitement. This was exactly the kind of major client we needed to take my business to the next level. Our wedding day was beautiful but stressful. Barbara had changed the floral arrangements the night before without telling me because she decided the colors I'd chosen wouldn't photograph well. She'd also upgraded our honeymoon suite without asking, insisting we needed the presidential suite rather than the ocean view room we'd selected. Michael smoothed things over, assuring me his mother just wanted the best for us, but I couldn't help feeling my choices were being overridden. We returned from our honeymoon to find Barbara had sent an enormous gift basket to my office with a note requesting a meeting to kick off our partnership properly. The initial marketing contract focused on refreshing her brand's image to appeal to younger consumers without alienating her loyal customer base. My team and I threw ourselves into the work, developing a comprehensive strategy that included social media campaigns, influencer partnerships, and in-store experiences designed to create Instagram-worthy moments. 3 months in, Barbara's flagship store saw a 30% increase in foot traffic and a 25% boost in sales from new customers. By month 6, we'd rolled out the strategy to 5 more locations with similar results. Barbara was thrilled, inviting me to join executive meetings where I presented our results and next steps. I felt validated not just as her daughter-in-law, but as a business professional she respected. "Jessica has transformed how customers see our brand," she told her executive team during one meeting, her hand resting on my shoulder. "We're lucky to have her as part of the family." The pride in her voice made me glow with accomplishment. Michael was supportive, but occasionally cautioned me about his mother's business approach. "Just be careful," he said one night after I mentioned Barbara. "Wanted to expand our contract. Mom tends to blur the lines between business and personal, and she doesn't always respect boundaries." I brushed off his concerns. "She's been nothing but professional with me, and this contract is helping my agency grow faster than I ever imagined." With the success of our marketing campaigns, Michael and I were able to put a down payment on a beautiful craftsman home in a neighborhood we'd previously only dreamed about. We used our own savings and took pride in achieving this milestone ourselves, though Barbara insisted on buying us an expensive dining set as a housewarming gift. "Every successful couple needs a proper place to entertain," she declared, arranging to have it delivered without consulting us about style or preferences. It was beautiful, but not what we would have chosen, a pattern that was becoming increasingly familiar. Barbara began dropping by our house unannounced, often around dinner time. "I was just in the neighborhood," she'd say, though her home was 40 minutes away. She'd inspect our home, offering unsolicited advice about decorating or maintenance, and inevitably steer conversation toward business, asking detailed questions about my other clients or suggesting new directions for her company's marketing. The boundaries between my roles as daughter-in-law and marketing director grew increasingly blurred. Barbara would call at 9 at night to discuss campaign ideas or text during weekend brunches with friends to ask about sales numbers. When I gently suggested keeping business conversations to business hours, she looked hurt. "I thought we had a special relationship, Jessica. Most daughters-in-law would be grateful for this level of professional inclusion." During a major presentation to Barbara's entire executive team, I noticed something troubling. As I outlined the strategy my team had developed for their holiday campaign, Barbara subtly repositioned some of the key concepts as her own ideas. As I was telling Jessica last week, we need to focus on experiential marketing for the younger demographic, she said, though the concept had actually come from my team's research. Michael noticed my frustration when I recounted the meeting. "That's classic Mom," he sighed. "She's always had trouble sharing credit. Dad used to say she'd take credit for the sunrise if she could figure out how. I worked really hard on that." "Presentation," I said, "and my team deserves recognition for their ideas." Michael pulled me into a hug. "I know, and you're right to be annoyed. Do you want me to talk to her?" I shook my head. "I'll handle it professionally. I don't want to create family tension over business stuff." But the incident left me questioning whether the prestigious contract was worth the growing complications in our family dynamics. I was beginning to understand why Michael had been so determined to build his career independently of his mother's influence. 9 months into our contract, Barbara invited me to lunch at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the bay. After ordering, she reached across the table and clasped my hand warmly. "Jessica, darling, I've been thinking. Your work has been exceptional, truly transformative for our brand. I'd like to bring you on full-time as our Chief Marketing Officer. Salary of $300,000 plus benefits and stock options." I blinked in surprise. The offer was financially generous, nearly double what I was currently taking home from my agency, but something inside me resisted immediately. "That's incredibly flattering, Barbara, but my agency is my baby. I've built it from nothing, and I have clients who depend on me and employees who've been with me through the lean times." Barbara's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled slightly. "I understand loyalty, but this is an opportunity to join a much larger organization with resources your small agency simply can't match. You wouldn't have to worry about payroll or chasing clients. And," she added with pointed emphasis, "it would make you truly part of the family business." The implication was clear. Turning down the job might mean being less family. I took a slow sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "I appreciate the vote of confidence, I really do. But I need to remain independent. We can absolutely continue and even expand our current arrangement, but I can't give up my agency." Barbara nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course, dear. It was just an idea. We'll continue as we are." She smoothly changed the subject, but something had shifted. The warmth in her voice had a practiced quality now, like an actress playing a role. 2 weeks later, Barbara hosted a dinner party for her executive team and their spouses. Michael and I attended, mingling with the company leadership in a more social setting. During dinner, the conversation turned to business growth, and I mentioned a small local company my agency had helped quadruple their customer base through targeted digital campaigns. "Jessica has such enthusiasm," Barbara interjected with a light laugh. "Though in fairness, it's much easier to show dramatic growth with tiny companies than with established businesses like ours. Real enterprise-level marketing requires a different skill set entirely." The dismissal of my accomplishment hung in the air. A few executives glanced down at their plates awkwardly. Michael's hand found mine under the table and squeezed supportively. "Actually," he said clearly, "Jessica's agency just won the Regional Marketing Excellence Award specifically for their work-scaling strategies from small businesses to larger enterprises. Her team's approach is being featured as a case study at next month's national conference." Barbara's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How wonderful. More wine, anyone?" On the drive home, Michael apologized for his mother's behavior. "That was completely inappropriate. She's never been good at handling someone saying no to her." The next day, he called her and apparently had a frank conversation about respecting professional boundaries. Barbara sent an elaborate flower arrangement to my office with a note apologizing for any misunderstanding at the dinner. Things returned to a strained normalcy until 3 weeks later, when Amanda, my operations director and first employee, came into my office looking uncomfortable. I need to tell you something weird, she said, closing the door. Barbara called me yesterday and asked me to lunch. I thought it was about the campaign we're working on for her summer collection. But, she hesitated. She offered me a job. Director of Digital Marketing at almost twice my current salary. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What did you say? I told her I'm happy where I am and that it felt wrong to discuss this behind your back. She said she understood but that the offer remains open. Amanda looked genuinely distressed. I would never leave, Jessica. We've built this place together. But I thought you should know. That evening, I called Barbara directly, something I rarely did as we usually communicated through her assistant for business matters. I understand you had lunch with Amanda yesterday, I said when she answered, keeping my voice level. Yes, she's a bright young woman, very talented. Barbara, you can't try to poach my key employees. It's unprofessional and, frankly, feels personal. There was a pause. Business is business, Jessica. If I find talent I want for my company, I pursue it. I'd think you of all people would understand. Ambition. There's a difference between ambition and undermining a family member's business. How would you feel if I tried to hire your merchandise director? That's hardly the same thing, she replied coolly. My company has systems and resources your little agency simply doesn't. I was offering Amanda growth opportunities you can't provide. The conversation ended without a real resolution. Barbara didn't exactly apologize, instead saying she regretted. If I misinterpreted her intentions, a non-apology that left me seething. Michael was furious when I told him. This is completely out of line. She knows exactly what she's doing. The incident created tension not just between Barbara and me, but increasingly between Michael and his mother. He felt torn between loyalty to me and his lifelong relationship with his dominant mother. The stress began affecting our marriage, with Michael growing quieter and more withdrawn. After a particularly difficult week where Barbara canceled a meeting with my team at the last minute, costing us valuable preparation time and billable hours, Michael suggested we see a couples therapist to help navigate the complex family business relationship. I love you, he said, holding my hands tightly. And I hate that my mother is coming between us. We need tools to deal with this together. The therapist helped us establish clearer boundaries between our personal and professional lives and suggested strategies for dealing with Barbara's behavior. Just as we were finding our footing, my agency landed a major new client, a regional department store chain directly competing with Barbara's mid-range retail line. The client had specifically sought us out based on the success of our campaigns. For Barbara's company, I knew taking them on would create conflict, but turning them away would mean limiting my agency's growth potential and betraying my business principles. After careful consideration and discussion with Michael, I decided to accept the new client, implementing strict confidentiality protocols to ensure no proprietary information from either company would be compromised. Barbara's reaction when she learned about our new client was nuclear. She called me directly, something she rarely did for business matters. You've accepted Westfield's account? Her voice was dangerously quiet. My direct competitor? Yes. We have proper confidentiality measures in place to— This is a betrayal, Jessica. After everything I've done for you and your little agency, I introduced you to my entire network. I gave you credibility you hadn't earned. Her words stung precisely because they targeted my deepest insecurities. Had my agency's growth been due to my hard work or merely Barbara's connections? Barbara, this is business. There's no exclusivity clause in our contract, and we've been transparent about— Consider our contract terminated, effective immediately, she cut in. I'll have legal send the paperwork. I expected better from family. The phone went dead. Within an hour, her company's attorney emailed formal termination papers, citing the early cancellation fee they would pay, but making it clear we were to turn over all materials and cease work immediately. The financial hit was substantial. Barbara's company represented about 30% of our billing, and while we had a solid client base, Replacing that income wouldn't happen overnight. I had to cancel the office expansion we'd been planning and freeze 2 new positions we'd been about to fill. Michael was incredibly supportive, assuring me we'd get through this and that I'd made the right ethical choice. You can't let her dictate who you work with. That's not a partnership. It's control. But Barbara wasn't finished. She began subtly undermining me in business circles, making comments to mutual contacts that raised questions about my agency's stability and judgment. A potential client mentioned during a pitch meeting that they'd heard we had trouble maintaining long-term relationships with major clients, a clear reference to Barbara's narrative. The most painful escalation came when Barbara began working on Michael directly. She called him constantly with minor family emergencies or questions only he could answer. She mentioned health concerns that later proved exaggerated. When these tactics didn't pull him away from me, she tried a new approach. "Your wife is using you for connections," she told him during a lunch she'd insisted was urgent. "She's ambitious, which isn't bad in itself. But do you really think she would have been interested in you if it weren't for my business opportunities?" Michael relayed this to me with disgust, but I could see the words had landed a blow. The seed of doubt had been planted, and though he rejected it consciously, relationships are fragile things. Barbara was expertly wielding her lifetime of emotional influence over her son. As Thanksgiving approached, tension built around family gatherings. Michael wanted to skip his mother's traditional holiday dinner, but I argued it would only escalate the conflict. "We need to show we're not intimidated," I said, though in truth I was dreading the encounter. The holiday gathering was excruciating. Barbara played the gracious hostess, but inserted subtle digs throughout dinner. When I mentioned our new office layout, she sighed. Scaling back can be so difficult, but sometimes we overextend ourselves. When Michael described a challenging software implementation, she patted my hand and said, "Jessica understands disappointment too, don't you, dear? Not everything works out as planned." After dinner, while Michael helped his cousin move furniture in another room, Barbara cornered me in the kitchen. "You know, Jessica, I've been reflecting on our situation," she said, leaning against the counter with a glass of expensive bourbon. "I gave you so much. Connections, credibility. A contract your little agency honestly wasn't qualified for." I remained silent, loading dishes into the dishwasher to keep my hands busy. "I invested in you," she continued, "and investments should see returns. $200,000 seems fair compensation for the doors I opened for you. Pay that, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us." I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "Excuse me?" $200,000, she repeated calmly, "for the business opportunities and connections I provided. Once that's settled, I'll stop discussing certain concerns I have with Michael about your motivations in marrying him." My blood ran cold. "Are you threatening my marriage?" Barbara smiled thinly. "I'm offering a business solution. Pay me for the value I provided, or accept that my son will eventually understand you used him to get to me and my connections. Your choice, dear." The drive home was silent, tears streaming down my face as I contemplated whether my marriage was about to be priced at $200,000. Michael asked repeatedly what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him his mother had essentially tried to extort me with threats to destroy our marriage. For 3 days, I kept Barbara's ultimatum to myself, turning it over in my mind until I felt physically ill. Sleep became impossible. I'd doze off only to jerk awake with Barbara's words echoing in my head. "Pay me or forget my son." The stress began affecting my work, with Amanda pulling me aside to ask if everything was all right after I zoned out during an important client call. During those sleepless nights, I began researching Barbara's business practices more thoroughly, speaking confidentially with industry contacts and former employees. What emerged was a disturbing pattern. Barbara had a history of fostering dependency in business relationships, then leveraging that dependency for control. Former partners described feeling trapped in arrangements that increasingly favored her companies. A previous marketing director had left abruptly under mysterious circumstances after 5 successful years. Most disturbingly, I discovered Barbara had a pattern with Michael's previous relationships. His college girlfriend had been offered a prestigious internship at Barbara's company, then abruptly fired after she and Michael had a minor argument. His last serious girlfriend before me had been systematically isolated from him through Barbara's constant emergencies and demands on his time, eventually giving him an ultimatum to choose between her or his mother. Barbara had won. The evidence was clear. Barbara had done this before and would continue doing it unless something changed. With a sick feeling, I realized I couldn't keep this from Michael any longer. The choice wasn't really about money at all. It was about whether our marriage could survive the truth about his mother. On the 4th night, I broke down and told Michael everything. We sat on our living room couch, my hands shaking as I recounted his mother's exact words. Michael's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to rage as I spoke. "She can't do this," he said, pacing the room after I finished. "This is extortion. Emotional blackmail, my own mother." His voice cracked on the last word, and my heart broke for him. This wasn't just my crisis, it was shattering his relationship with his only living parent. "I'll talk to her," he said firmly. "This ends now." Despite my concerns, Michael insisted on confronting Barbara immediately. He called and asked to meet her for coffee the next morning, giving no indication of what he wanted to discuss. I spent that morning in a state of high anxiety, unable to focus on work, checking my phone constantly. When Michael returned, his face told the story before he spoke. "She denied everything," he said flatly. "Said you misunderstood, that she was just expressing concern about the impact of your business decisions on our family relationships, that she never asked for money." It was exactly what I'd feared. She made sure there were no witnesses. "She cried," Michael continued, looking lost. "Said she was hurt that I would believe you over her, that you've been turning me against her since we got married." That night, my phone exploded with text messages from Barbara's sister and Michael's cousins, all expressing concern about my accusations and attempts to divide the family. Barbara had gone on immediate offense, positioning herself as the victim of my scheming. "Classic triangulation," our therapist explained in an emergency session the next day. "She's creating allies by controlling the narrative, making it your word against not just hers, but the entire family's." Recognizing the manipulation didn't make it less effective. Michael was torn between his love for me and a lifetime of conditioning to trust his mother. I could see the strain in the new lines around his eyes, in the way he'd pause before speaking as if weighing every word. I began documenting every interaction with Barbara meticulously. I saved emails, text messages, and voicemails. I recorded meeting notes with timestamps. It wasn't that I didn't trust Michael's support, but I needed evidence to combat the gaslighting. That was making us both question reality. Then came the breaking point. Barbara showed up at our home unannounced on a Sunday afternoon, pushing past me into the foyer. "We need to resolve this situation," she announced. "Michael is suffering because of this tension, and as the women who love him, we should fix it." Michael emerged from his home office looking startled. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to clear the air," she said, settling herself in our living room as if she'd been invited. "Jessica seems to have misunderstood some things I said at Thanksgiving, and it's created this unnecessary drama." "I didn't misunderstand anything," I said quietly. "You asked me for $200,000 and threatened my marriage if I didn't pay." Barbara laughed, the sound brittle and artificial. "Don't be absurd. Why would I need money from you?" She turned to Michael. "Honey, I was trying to explain to Jessica that business and family don't always mix well. The money I mentioned was what her agency earned from our contract, hardly an unreasonable topic of discussion." I held my ground. "You said, and I quote, 'Pay me for the value I provided, or accept that my son will eventually understand you used him to get to me and my connections. Jessica, you're clearly stressed about your agency's financial troubles. After losing our account, Barbara said with exaggerated patience. Perhaps you're projecting your money worries onto our conversation. I was about to respond when Michael spoke. Stop it, Mom. His voice was quiet but firm. Just stop. Barbara blinked. Stop what, dear? The manipulation, the gaslighting. I've been watching it my whole life, but I never saw it clearly until now. He moved to stand beside me. Jessica wouldn't make this up. She has no reason to lie. You, on the other hand, have a history of interfering in my relationships and using money and business as leverage. Barbara's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of cold calculation crossing her features before she composed herself. I can see she's poisoned you against me completely. My own son. Her voice broke theatrically on the last word. But Michael wasn't backing down. I want you to leave our house, now. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest. After Barbara left, Michael held me while I cried with relief. For the first time since the ultimatum, I felt like we might actually survive this intact. I knew then that I wouldn't pay Barbara's extortion, not because I couldn't afford it, but because giving in would only be the beginning of a lifetime of control. Over the next week, Michael and I developed a strategy together. We consulted with an attorney who specialized in business ethics and defamation, documenting Barbara's pattern of behavior and her attempts to damage my professional reputation. The lawyer advised us that while Barbara's ultimatum was morally reprehensible, proving it legally would be challenging without recorded evidence. However, her interference with my business relationships could potentially constitute tortious interference if we could prove she was spreading false information. We decided on a two-pronged approach. Michael would maintain minimal, carefully bounded contact with his mother, while I would focus on protecting my business from her interference. We both agreed that no amount of family pressure would change our united stance. Just as we were implementing our plan, I received an urgent call from the marketing director at Westfield, our new department store client. Jessica, I'm not sure what's going on, but we received a strange email from Barbara Andrews claiming your agency was under investigation for breach of confidentiality. Is there something I should know? My stomach dropped. Barbara had escalated beyond family manipulation to directly attacking my business. Similar calls came in from 2 other clients that same day, all reporting variations of the same rumor. Barbara was systematically contacting my client list, spreading false information designed to create doubt about my agency's integrity. I called an emergency meeting with my entire team, explaining the situation transparently. I'm dealing with a personal conflict that's spilling over into our business, I told them. Barbara Andrews is spreading false information about us to clients. I want you all to know what's happening because it affects everyone here. The team's support was overwhelming. Amanda organized a client communication plan, personally reaching out to our most important accounts to reassure them. The development team accelerated several deliverables to demonstrate our continued excellence despite the distractions. Everyone pulled together, working late and coming in early to ensure no client could doubt our commitment. Meanwhile, Michael made the painful decision to go completely no contact with his mother until she acknowledged her behavior and showed genuine remorse. He wrote her a detailed letter explaining his decision, copied to several family members to prevent Barbara from controlling the narrative. I will always love you as my mother, he wrote, but I cannot and will not allow you to manipulate, threaten, or harm the woman I've chosen as my partner. Your behavior has crossed lines that can't be uncrossed without genuine acknowledgement and change. On the business front, I instructed our attorney to send Barbara a formal cease and desist letter regarding her communications with my clients. The letter detailed the specific false claims she'd made and the legal consequences of continued defamation and business interference. Barbara's reaction was swift and predictable. Within hours of receiving the cease and desist, she called Michael, in tears, claiming chest pains and saying she needed to go to the hospital. It was the same tactic she'd used successfully in previous conflicts, a health emergency to regain control and elicit sympathy. "Do you think I should go to the hospital?" Michael asked me, clearly torn. "If she's genuinely having chest pains, she should call an ambulance, not her estranged son," I said gently. "This is a manipulation tactic, and engaging now will teach her that legal boundaries can be overcome with health scares." It was excruciating for Michael to hold the line, but he did. He texted his aunt to check on Barbara and learned that the emergency had mysteriously resolved once it became clear he wasn't rushing to her side. The cease and desist letter had its intended effect on Barbara's business interference. The calls from concerned clients stopped, though the damage to some relationships had been done. We lost 2 smaller accounts in the fallout, clients who decided the drama surrounding our agency wasn't worth the risk, regardless of who was at fault. As word of the conflict spread through business circles, something unexpected happened. Other business owners began reaching out with their own Barbara stories. A supplier who'd been pressured into exclusive terms that nearly bankrupted his company. A real estate agent who'd been threatened with rumors about her business practices after a deal with Barbara went south. A former executive who'd left Barbara's company after years of similar manipulative behavior. "She creates these spider webs of obligation and dependency," the former executive told me over coffee. "By the time you realize you're stuck, it's almost impossible to break free without significant damage. You're doing the right thing by standing firm now." Those conversations were validating but also sobering. Barbara had built her business success partly on these tactics, and she wasn't likely to abandon them easily. The road ahead would be difficult, with potential impacts on both my business and Michael's family relationships. The most painful moment came at a family wedding where Michael's cousin was getting married. We debated attending, but ultimately decided we wouldn't let Barbara isolate us from the entire family. When we arrived at the reception, several relatives avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the conflict. Others approached to express quiet support, having experienced Barbara's manipulation themselves over the years. Barbara herself played the role of dignified victim perfectly, accepting condolences for her son's temporary estrangement as if it were a death in the family. When she spotted us across the room, she made a show of dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief before being comforted by a circle of sympathetic relatives. "She's good," Michael said quietly. "She's had a lifetime to perfect this act." Despite the emotional strain, we maintained our boundaries. My agency focused on delivering exceptional work to our remaining clients, while developing new business strategies that didn't rely on the connections Barbara had provided. It was challenging, and there were weeks when I wondered if my business would survive, but we adapted and persevered. Michael's solidarity never wavered, though I could see the toll the estrangement took on him. He started therapy to process the complex grief of recognizing his mother's true nature and setting boundaries with her for the first time in his life. "I keep wondering if I could have seen this sooner," he confessed one night. "If I could have protected you from this." "We're protecting each other now," I reminded him. "That's what matters." 6 months after Barbara's ultimatum, my agency had weathered the worst of the storm. We'd lost some clients but gained others who valued our integrity and resilience. Our team had emerged stronger from the crisis, with a clearer sense of our values and a deeper commitment to ethical business practices. The most surprising outcome was how cutting ties with Barbara's toxic influence actually strengthened our company culture. Without the pressure to accommodate her demands and expectations, we were free to develop our own authentic approach to client relationships. We implemented a no assholes policy for new clients, politely declining to work with companies that showed signs of the manipulative behavior we'd experienced with Barbara. Michael's journey was more complex. He mourned the mother he thought he had while coming to terms with who she really was. Through therapy and honest conversations with extended family members, He began to understand the generational patterns that had shaped Barbara's controlling behavior and his own responses to it. My grandfather was the same way with her, his aunt confided during a rare heart-to-heart. Using money and business connections as control mechanisms, making love conditional on compliance. She learned it from him, though that doesn't excuse what she's done to you and Jessica. Industry peers surprised us with their support. Several prominent business owners who'd had their own difficult experiences with Barbara reached out to collaborate, with my agency explicitly citing our ethical stance as the reason. Anyone who stands up to Barbara Andrews has backbone, one told me. That's exactly the kind of marketing partner we want. Barbara made several attempts at reconciliation, though none included genuine accountability. She sent expensive gifts, which we returned, made tearful phone calls to extended family members about wanting to heal the rift, and even showed up at my office once with a check for $20,000 as a peace offering, a fraction of her original demand, but still an attempt to solve the problem with money rather than honesty. Each time, we maintained the same boundary. We would consider rebuilding a relationship only after she acknowledged her ultimatum and the business interference that followed. She never did. The true turning point came when we discovered my agency was actually performing better without Barbara's connections. Our revenues surpassed pre-conflict levels in the 8th month, with a client base built on genuine relationships rather than obligatory referrals. The work was more satisfying, the clients more aligned with our values, and the business more sustainable. Inspired by our experience, I started a mentorship program for women entrepreneurs facing similar challenges with difficult business relationships. Boundaries in Business became a monthly workshop where I shared the lessons learned from my conflict with Barbara, helping others identify manipulation early and respond with integrity rather than fear. Michael found unexpected peace in our limited family contact. I always thought being a good son meant being available 24/7, he reflected. Now I understand that healthy relationships require boundaries, even with parents. When we discovered I was pregnant with twins a year after the conflict, we had serious discussions about what relationship, if any, Barbara would have with her grandchildren. We decided on limited supervised contact contingent on continued respect for our boundaries. Barbara would need to earn trust gradually, without the automatic access she clearly expected. The pregnancy news prompted another round of reconciliation. Attempts from Barbara now centered on her right to be involved with her grandchildren. Michael held firm, explaining calmly that access to our children would depend on her ability to respect our parenting decisions and boundaries. Through the entire ordeal, I learned profound lessons about the dangers of mixing family and business, without clear boundaries. What had seemed like a perfect opportunity, working with my mother-in-law's successful company, had nearly cost me my marriage and my business. The experience taught me to value independence over convenience, integrity over opportunity, and to recognize the true cost of success built on compromised values. The freedom I found in standing up to Barbara's manipulation was worth far more than any contract or connection she could have provided. By refusing to pay her ultimatum price, I reclaimed not just my business autonomy, but my personal power. As I sit here today, watching my agency thrive and my relationship with Michael stronger than ever, I realize the most important business decision I ever made was refusing to treat my marriage and my integrity as commodities for sale. Have you ever had to choose between an important relationship and your professional integrity? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic conversations about navigating the complex intersections of business, family, and personal boundaries. And remember, sometimes the hardest no you'll ever say becomes the foundation of your greatest strength. Thank you for listening to my journey.